Hello, hello. Welcome to our Thrive Thursday Masterclass. Whitney is our host here. I'm on the call because I'm the trainer today. So, Whitney, I'll let you do the typical introductions and then we'll get started with training.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mary. So we'll go around and do our introductions before Mary starts with her presentation.
Mhm.
So Dee Dee, why don't you start us off with who you are, where you live, what you do, and anything else that you want to share with us.
Sure. So I'm Dee Dee Jacques. I own Account on Dee Dee, which does bookkeeping, payroll, tax returns. I help with business structure, kind of all things numbers. I operate out of Chandler, Arizona, but I work virtually with a lot of my clients, so I can work in various states as well.
Nice.
Awesome. And Mary, you want to go next?
Sure, sure. I'm Mary Gaul, owner of Success Magnified and leader of the Leap for Ladies community at this point. I am a business coach and I primarily work with women entrepreneurs who are just need that sounding board. They're in their business alone. They might have some contractors and maybe a couple of employees, but they really are making all the decisions about what's happening in their business by themselves and they're getting burned out. And so they really need to talk to a coach and find out, do that brain dump, say, here's everything I'm thinking about my business, and help me sort through that and put it in prioritized action plans. And then I also help with accountability as well. So love, love, love working with entrepreneurs and people running their own business. And I'm just such a big supporter of women entrepreneurs, which is why I am now the leader of the Leap for Ladies community. So happy to be here with a couple of members and to have this training for our Thrive Thursday Masterclass series.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Whitney Coburn. I live in Rockaway Beach, New York City. And you know me as a dating and relationship expert, the love coach. I recently just got this. I was excited to get it
Ooh,
in my
cool.
inbox, but it's an integrative somatic trauma therapy certification that I did over several months, learned so much. So I am really excited to be more well-rounded as a therapist to be able to help people through their trauma, through their blocks, because we don't think about emotions being a part of our workday, but oh my goodness, they are. So
Mm-hmm.
this
Yes.
is where it helps to really go into the body, because the body has wisdom to heal without having to dredge up all the old traumas and relive that. So that's what I'm excited about, is that somatic therapy piece. So thank you for that.
Nice, nice. Congratulations, Whitney. That's big. That's big. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, today, because this is kind of a last minute, I'm filling in because we had an open spot. So Whitney maybe doesn't have the information about the topic that I'm going to talk about today. So I'm pulling one of the trainings out of my bucket of trainings that I do for entrepreneurs. And so this one, we're going to be talking today all about the power of critical thinking, and critical thinking, especially as a business owner with a business owner slant, right? In this day and age, we need all the critical thinking. And when I say critical thinking, I'm not saying be critical of yourself or others. It's be critical in the way you're evaluating the data that you're receiving, right? So critical thinking, we're going to go into the definition of that in the presentation, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. So both for Dee Dee and Whitney on the call, if you have questions, please interrupt me during the time. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of go through the recording, through the slides here, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. If you have any questions or if you have anything to interject, just please, hop on in. Happy to have your discussion. So I am going to open up my slides here. Let's see if I do this one, and if I go to a slideshow from the beginning. Are you guys seeing the big slide? Okay, great. So I'm going to set my timer here as well, just so I kind of stay on track with the time. Okay, as I mentioned before, I'm Mary Gaul and owner of Success Magnified, where I get to work with entrepreneurs and act as a thought partner with them. And so part of my goal around being a thought partner is helping them think more critically about their business. Again, critically, not in putting ourselves down or negatively. Our brains are wired to do that automatically anyway. They don't need any help from me on that. We need help with really thinking about and breaking down the data and information that we're receiving as a business owner. So how many of you remember the good old days when there was just 3 networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, and they only had 1 hour of news each day, maybe 2 hours, one in the morning, one in the night, and anchors that we all knew and could trust, right? We knew if these guys said something, it was well researched, it was true. So you got in-depth news, or you're also from reading your newspaper, right? Unfortunately, most of the newspapers have disappeared. If you wanted to know something, especially as a kid, where did your mom tell you to go? They told us to go to the library, right? Or go get a book, right? Go to the encyclopedia. We had a set of Britannica encyclopedias at the end of our hallway, and they were well used. We had to go look things up all the time. And so we had to go and look things up, and we knew that things that were in those set of books we could trust, right? They were from validated resources. And our lives now, some of the stats that are out there, large majority of Americans get their news on digital devices, which we all have a phone in front of us, right? So most people are getting their news on their smartphone. They're not, some people still watch the news on television or radio or print publications, right? News consumption by social media sites. So this is a percentage of US adults who regularly get their news on each social media site. So this was from 2023, so a year and a half-ish ago. Facebook and YouTube are where people are getting their news, which is so scary, right? And now, because Facebook has even taken off more of their fact-finding or truth, regulations, it's even scarier the fact that most people are getting between those top 2 social media channels, that's 56% of Americans. Half of Americans are getting their news from Facebook and YouTube. So we have to be more critical thinking about how we're consuming information. There is more noise out there than ever, right? When we started, we said there used to be just 3 platforms, CBS, NBC, and ABC, right? Those were the 3. Now there's a million different places to go and get your news, or opinion news, as I call it, right? Where they just have people coming in saying, in my opinion, I think this, XYZ, right? So there's lots of those out there for us to choose to consume, right? There's the late night talk show host, which a lot of people, I remember when Jon Stewart was doing The Daily Show, a lot of my friends, they're like, that's where I get my news, is from The Daily Show, right? So we might get our news from snippets from late night comedy, late night talk show hosts. There's all kinds of media out there about, is it facts or is it fake news? What do we believe and what can we believe? And if somebody says something loud enough and long enough and how many times, we start to believe it, right? Our brains are trained that way. So we really have to hone our critical thinking skills. This is just for the news of the world, right? We haven't even gotten into why we need it as a business owner, but just as a human being living in the world today, there's so much stuff coming at us. We really need to develop some critical thinking skills. So a great news aggregator that I use is called The Skim, and there's a website there. It's a paid service, but they kind of give you an overview of what's happening during the day, and then you can click and go into more detailed, researched, reported, vetted by reporters, actual data, right? So find something like that for you, that you don't have to pay attention to all the other news. I don't watch the news. I don't do social media. I do it for, LinkedIn is about the only social media I go into anymore. And I read things through the Skim to kind of understand what's happening in the world. I read the Forbes thing to understand what's happening in the stock market for finances. So I'm interested in that. But then I turn everything else off, because Or if I am listening to something, I always take it with a grain of salt, right? Like I don't know that that's true, and that's only part of the story I'm hearing, probably. So if I'm interested in the story, I might go and research some more and find out other things about it, right? So, okay. So do we have more noise, or are these considered resources, right? So we have the internet at our fingertips, Google, we have Wikipedia. So whereas we used to have to go to the encyclopedia, now we go to Wikipedia and we find out things. But Wikipedia is managed by people, right? Who can make things up or not make things up. So again, we have to be able to sort through some of our data. And then, of course, there's a million different social media platforms that we can be on that are giving us more and more noise about, especially, you know, even what to do, excuse me, what to do in our business, right? So check everything that's political or scientific. Snopes.com is a good resource because it is vetting and it will tell you this is true, this is not true, and here's why it is or isn't true, right? So Snopes.com is a good one to look at, especially if you're reposting something and you're not sure about the data that you're reposting. You want to make sure that what you're putting out there, let's be good citizens, and let's don't just repost to repost. Let's verify before we repost, right? So go to Snopes.com and you can check political and scientific facts there. And we get lots of advice, right? Especially as business owners or human beings. There's no shortage of resources on people telling us what we should be doing, right? So podcasts, there's a million podcasts out there, YouTube videos, right? Books that are out there. Everybody's got a book out, right? And I've got books out, right? It's a great way to share your knowledge with people. But again, how do you determine what is the best information for you to apply in your business situation? And now we have AI jumping in the middle of everything, right? So it's changing daily how it's built into the software that we're using. It's built into our phones. My phone just did an update this week, and now there's a new AI tool that's built in there, right? It's like, okay, it just came with the update. So it's built into more and more of our tools, and we just need to know how AI works, or the generative AI anyway, like ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot. Those things work. They're called large language models. And it's basically just acting like a big fill in the blank. So it says, like when we've all started typing an email to somebody, right? And it fills in the rest of your sentence. That's the large language model at play. So whether you're going into chat and typing in a prompt saying, help me come up with my social media marketing, or help me respond to this client in this manner, it's taking all of the pieces of data, 175 trillion pieces of data chat uses, 175 trillion, right? Like I can't even wrap my head around what that number is in pieces of data. But it's taking all of those things and it says, how do I complete Mary's sentence based on the 175 trillion pieces of data I have? What are the most likely next words that are going to complete her sentence? So it's acting as a big fill in the blank. So that's how those work. So when it's pulling from all of this data that's out there on the internet and in Wikipedia and encyclopedias and books and things like that, right? It's pulling from all of that knowledge. Not all of that stuff is good or true, right? So again, how do we put some filters on things that we're receiving? So how can you make a decision when there's so much advice and opinions out there, right? If we just look at business ownership, Whitney, there's so much advice out there about relationships and dating and all kinds of apps and all kinds of stuff you can be on, right? So it makes it almost paralyzing for people to take action because there's so many different things for us to listen to. So the answer is, when you find yourself getting overwhelmed with all these data points, sharpen your critical thinking skills. So we're going to go through a couple of definitions of critical thinking. These are some of the scientists who kind of developed this method, if you will. So critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, or evaluating information gathered from or generated by blah, 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 blah. You can see it's kind of scientific and it's not very user-friendly. So that may leave you saying, I still don't understand that. What does that mean, right? So really, what is critical thinking? I like to, not dumb it down, but simplify it. So if you go back to kind of a Dr. Seuss version of critical thinking, you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself in any direction you choose, right? So go back to the simplest answer. So when we go somewhere in between there, not Dr. Seuss, but not the scientist guy, really what is critical thinking? It's vital that you have a system to help you filter all the information you're receiving and put it into perspective. When you think about how our brain works when it receives data, it's receiving all this data all the time, right? And it learns to, I'm going to forget these. It learns to generate, generalize, that's what it is. Oh shoot, I just forgot what it does. There's 3 things it does. So it says, hey, I need to pay attention to this. It's something new. Or it says, I know what that is. I can put it over here. I don't need to think about it. Or it says, that's something new, but it seems like something else we've already had. So it generalizes those things, right? So it's constantly, our brain is constantly filtering things that are inputs that are coming into us and doing one of those 3 things with it. So why is critical thinking important for business owners? It really shapes our worldview and our overall understanding of our clients and our markets, right? What do our clients need? What are the markets doing in my business? And then it helps us examine our own behavior and shaping opinions of others. It helps us to judge and evaluate media, news, and opinions and advice. And it helps filter out the noise to tap into what is right for your business, right? Because each business is unique. Yes, there's some things that are commoditized, right? But each business owned by an individual business owner is unique. And the things that might be right for my business may not be right for Whitney's business or may not be right for Dee Dee's business, right? So we really do need to filter out some of that noise. And how do we do that, right? That's critical thinking. So here's just some scenarios to tap into that might help us understand this process a little bit more. So the shiny object trap, right? We've all fallen into that as business owners. Is every new trend worth it? So the scenario is Lisa, a health coach. She kept hearing about the latest trends in marketing, like TikTok ads, AI-driven funnels, paid partnerships, and she felt the pressure to jump on every new tactic, but she wasn't seeing results. So her critical thinking in action. So instead of blindly following the trends, she took a step back and used a decision matrix to evaluate each opportunity. And she asked herself, does this align with my business goals? Do I have the time and resources to implement this effectively, right? Instead of just slapping something together and throwing it out there and hoping it works. And what ROI, or return on investment, can I expect? So just not, instead of following the trends, like everybody's telling me I got to do TikTok ads, I'm going to throw some out there and see if they work. Taking a step back, taking a deep breath and saying, let me look at this. Does it align with my business goals? Maybe your clients aren't on TikTok, right? So that would be a step in the wrong direction. Do you have the time and resources to implement this correctly? Do you know how to create an ad and the words and the budget that you'll need to make it work effectively? And then once you know that, what's your return on investment? So can you expect to get clients or calls or people to buy a product from you, right? So what's your expectation and what's the reality based around that? So by thinking critically, she stopped chasing every new strategy and focused on the methods that best served her business. This saved her time, money, and frustration. So the lesson here is that critical thinking helps you separate real opportunities from distractions. I have another perfect example of this. One of my clients has been invited to do some speaking events around the country, right? So she started doing them last year, some little workshops and then speaking events. And she's tapped into a great network of people that want to have her, right? So she gets invited to do these all over the country. She's created a spreadsheet last year to help her evaluate, are these a good fit for me, right? Because sometimes they don't pay her to speak. Sometimes they might pay for her travel, but then they don't pay her to speak. Sometimes they do both, right? So she really has learned to evaluate when somebody says, hey, will you come speak to our group, or will you come facilitate this workshop? She can get more details, and then she compares it to her spreadsheet and says, okay, do I have to travel somewhere? How many what materials do I need to take? Is it an easy place to travel to? Because sometimes you can fly in direct to an airport. Sometimes you have to make connections and rent a car and do all that kind of stuff, right? So what are the other considerations around traveling? And then how many people are going to be there, right? And is it worth it for her to get potential clients out of it or potential speaking gigs? If there's the right mix of people are in the room, then yes, that may be a consideration, plus or minus, right? And then are they paying for her, incidentals, her meals or anything like that? Are they paying for a room for her to spend the night if it's too far away? And then what's her feeling about the group? Is this group in alignment with what she wants to teach, right? So if it's not necessarily in alignment, maybe it's not the right, but they're going to pay her, but still maybe it's not the right group for her, right? So that's been helpful for her because now she's able to use that every time somebody sends her an offer to come and speak. She can run it through that filter, and she just turned one down last week. She's like, I went through my filter and I said, they're not going to pay me for travel. They're going to pay me this much as a stipend, but I have to travel for 3 days, both there and back and everything, and be away from my business, and it just isn't the right fit. So she's able to say no with some caveats around, I'm making the best decision for my business, right? So we all have those shiny objects like, oh yeah, somebody wants me to speak, I'm flattered, I'll say yes, right? But taking a step back and saying, is this really the best speaking gig for me? So another client scenario is a tough client, right? So we work so hard to get our clients as small business owners, but sometimes we might have to fire a client, right? So a client of mine, Mia, she's a freelance consultant. She had a client who constantly demanded last minute changes, delayed payments, and really disrespected her time. She thought she was that person's only client and had full run of any time she needed something, that person should be at her beck and call. She was afraid to let this person go because they were a major source of her income, right? They were more than half of this person's income. So Mia took a step back and analyzed the situation using pros and cons, some logical reasoning, and risk assessment, right? What is the real cost of keeping this client? The stress, the extra hours, the emotional drain, and then the constant, almost really resenting, like anytime she was to the point, anytime she saw that person's name come up on her phone, just like instant energy drain and almost anger came up. Like she's just so taking advantage of me, right? That resentfulness. And that's not a good way to show up for clients, is being resentful of them, right? So could she replace them with a better client? So what else is possible? That's one of my favorite questions to ask. And then what boundaries could she set to improve the relationship? So if she wanted to keep this client, how could she start to put some boundaries around the time, around her, payment processes, those kind of things, so that she could keep that client and set some better boundaries with them? After evaluating the numbers and the energy costs, she decided to let go of this difficult client, and that freed up some time. And within a few weeks, she attracted 2 new clients who were her ideal clients, right? And they paid her just as much as this person she let go. They were lovely to work with. They respected her time. She started those boundaries up front, right? Because she learned that lesson. So really, that critical thinking allows you to make courageous and strategic decisions in your business. Okay, so there are 5 basic steps to critical thinking. And critical thinking is just a process. You're already doing it. When you answer what's for dinner, which we all have to answer that question at least once a day, right? Unless you do girl dinners, like some of my daughters just have a protein shake, it's girl dinner or whatever, so that's what they call it. What's for dinner? So you need to collect the data, right? Like, what am I hungry for? Am I going to order out? Do I have food in the house? What kind of food do I have in the house? You have to get some data. evaluate the sources of your information. So again, what kind of stuff do I have in the house? Or am I going to go out? Then I need to know, do I have to get dressed to go out? Am I going to order in? Do I want Chinese food, right? Then you're going to extract the key points. So, okay, I'm going to order out, and yes, I'm hungry for Chinese, but now I have to figure out, okay, what do I want that's on the Chinese food menu, right? So I've gathered my data, got my sources, I got my menu in front of me, so now the key points are going to be what type of food I'm going to order. I need to adjust for internal bias, right? So maybe I had Chinese food last week and it made me feel not so good, so now I'm not going to have that Chinese food ever again, right? So now I'm gonna, because my mind is saying don't ever eat that again, right? So that internal bias is there, so I'm going to adjust for that and pick something different. And then I'm going to find the simplest solution, right? So ordering in is the simplest solution. I don't have to go out, I don't have to do anything, I can order it, it shows up right at my door, right? So that is your what's for dinner critical thinking in a very streamlined, we don't even realize we're doing it, process, right? So now we're going to dive into each one of those 5 steps. So step 1 is gathering the information needed to evaluate the problem. So first we have to make sure it is a problem, not that we just think we have a problem, but is it really a problem? The what, the when, the where, the why, the how, those basic kind of investigative questions, right? So we need to figure out all of those pieces, start gathering the information so that we can evaluate the true essence of the problem. And then we need to evaluate the sources of our information. I love Dilbert. My husband worked for a company that I swear was the foundation for Dilbert commercials. But, he says, your analysis does not conform to my preconceived notions. So my gut instinct is telling me that you're wrong, right? So much of that happens in the corporate world, right? But really evaluate the sources of our information. Like we talked about at the beginning, there's so many places we can gather information and not all of it's true or researched or vetted or any of those kind of things, right? So we need to make sure we're getting good information. Then we need to extract the key points. So think about how you want to sort through the information that you've gathered, right? So you start with the problem and then you've got your data. Now, how do I want to start to sort through the data? What are the most important pieces of the data for me to make this decision, right? So if you think about buying a car, right, you have to go out and figure out, okay, first I need a car. That's the problem, right? So I might need a new car. Mine's acting up or it's getting old or, you know, I have to spend some money to repair it. So do I need to get a new one or whatever? And then you would say, okay, let me gather all the data. So I've decided on a car, I'm going to buy a new car. So now I'm gathering all the data on the type of car I want. And then what are the key points that are going to help you sort through all of that data? So for me, I'm not a big car person. As long as it gets me from point A to point B, I'm fine, right? It doesn't have to be a certain brand or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But one thing that's super important to me is cup holders. So I told my car broker when I got my last car, I was like, I don't care what color it is, really what shape it is, you know, whatever. It has to be within this budget and it has to be able to hold my paddle boards in the back. And it has to have at least 2 to 3 cup holders for that I can access from the driver's, seat. So those are my requirements. Those are my key points that are important to me, right? I didn't care about, some of the other features. My husband's like, well, what about mileage? And what about blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, oh, that's whatever. The things that are important to me are cup holders and paddleboard space, right? So what are the key points of your data that you need to look at that's going to help you make a most informed decision? And then step number 4 is remove any bias. So we all have internal biases built into our brain just because we have had some interaction that helped us form a story about something in our past, right? So if you're thinking like everyone else, then you aren't thinking. I like that little quote there. So our emotions and our internal stories that we've developed to protect ourselves over the years can really bias our information. So just looking at your decision that you're making, right? So if you go back to the car example, some people are very biased against certain car brands, right? Like if you're a Ford person, you don't like the Chevy people. If you're a Chevy person, you don't like these people or whatever. it's a car for me. So, but, my husband has an electric car. So he's like, if electric cars are better than gas cars and and gas cars are better than electric cars, right? So people have these internal bias stories. So how do you at least recognize it? You may not be able to remove it, but how do you recognize it in your decision-making process? Is it skewing your decision one way or the other? And then step number 5 is find the simplest solution. So there's a theory called Occam's razor, right? Which is the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. So I like this little cartoon too. So he's looking at all the different blades and everything, and he's like, it's too complicated. So Occam chooses a razor, which I think is funny. So we really do we tend to overcomplicate things in the long run, right? So if we can keep things simple, like, for example, me using a car broker and say, you go do all the research, bring me back a car that holds 2 paddle boards and has 3 cup holders in the front, right? And if it's red, that's a bonus. And she did. She found me the perfect car that's red, and I love it. So really, it's just a matter of letting what's going to be the simplest solution, and can we allow it to be a simple answer? Sometimes we think if it's too simple, we have to complicate it somehow, right, as entrepreneurs. So we really need to keep things simple. So how do we keep up our critical thinking skills as generative AI ramps up, right? So we need to learn, continue building our own body of knowledge and skills, even if it's seemingly something that a computer could do for you. So yes, I am a huge proponent of, maybe I'm a component of AI as well, but I'm a huge proponent of AI, right? I use ChatGPT all the time, but I also learn things other ways, right? So, and even I love learning with AI, and you can have it teach you things in different complexities, right? So if I know nothing about combustion engines, because I just admitted I'm not a car person, right? So I know nothing about combustion engines, but I can go to Chat or Claude or Copilot and say, teach me about how a combustion engine works as a 5-year-old. And then now teach it to me as a 10-year-old or 12-year-old. Now teach it to me as a college graduate, right? So it can get more complex and help me learn things in a way that lets me build up my skill set, right? So we can use it for those things, but we do need to have some self-awareness about, does that sound too preposterous? Then it might be, right? So those kind of things. So that's step number 2, is stress the critical in the idea of critical thinking. Try to apply some healthy skepticism, whether it's to a news article, a YouTube video, an interesting newsletter, a corporate strategy document, or any other media. Look for additional sources for claims that you see, particularly ones that seem too good to be true. So if you're seeing an ad that follows you around everywhere on the internet for a business coach that can get you to, I can't even say it without choking. For an ad, for a business coach that can get you to multiple 6 figures in 6 weeks, right? With no list and no this and that. I mean, they're out there. I see those lists all the time, unfortunately. It's like no list and 4 hours a week, and you can be making 6 figures in 2 months or whatever, right? So if it's too good to be true, that adage is around for a reason, especially if, and again, in this age of AI, right? So there's lots of too good to be true things out there. It's okay to research them, but see if anybody else has that same kind of offer, or is somebody else talking about the same product in the same way, right? Just look for additional sources, especially if something does seem too good to be true. And then step 3 is reflect. So after you work with an AI, a generative LLM, do some reflecting. For example, if you're using ChatGPT to help you craft a persuasive message, like a marketing email or even a LinkedIn post, ask yourself how it went. Did it produce what you wanted? What elements seem to align with your thinking and which didn't? Making sure to stop and explore these questions with your own interactions will help you build a stronger critical thinker, make you a stronger critical thinker without having to rely on AI to do that. And you can even use AI to help you think of, if you're working on an idea and you could say, okay, play devil's advocate and tell me, fill in the holes. Or I just helped my sister update her resume. And so she had a job that she was working on and we were working on a resume in AI. And I said, tell me the gaps between the job description and her resume. So it can analyze some of those things for me and say, okay, here's where she needs to bump up her skills, or here's where we need to talk about her skills differently, and those kind of things, right? So it's good to help analyze data, but then you need to use your own brain. As Dr. Seuss says, you have a brain in your head, let's use it, right? So use it to not only just rely on AI to help you with everything. Okay, so here is a little worksheet that you can kind of walk through some scenarios about how you might use critical thinking. So in reviewing your networking activities, so in 2019, I was part of 6 networking groups, which is a lot, and I was running 2 of them. So it was a lot of work. I love networking. I love talking to entrepreneurs, but at one point I was getting burned out. And so I had to do some critical thinking about my networking groups, right? What data did I need to gather? So I needed to say, okay, how many groups am I in? I was surprised when I realized that it was that. And how many times do they meet? And then what assumptions am I making, right? Am I really getting quality connections from each one? Do I just feel like I am because I have a good time when I'm there? Am I assuming that I'm going to get clients from these people? Or, if I'm there to learn something or make different connections, right? Do I have any biases? So I work primarily with women, right? So I kind of prioritized and upgraded my women's networking groups versus co-ed networking groups, right? Is there an alternative? So for me, I dropped 3 of the groups. I was just like, I can't keep it up and they're not serving me the way I want them to. So I dropped those groups. You can look at cause and effect if you need to. And then the simplest solution for me was I'm stepping away from these groups. I made sure I kept the connections in those groups that I wanted to keep, but I didn't have to go to the meetings and pay the dues and all that kind of stuff. So that's some ways you can take any of these examples. Same thing with not making enough money or hiring a new team member, any kind of issue that you're having in your business. Go through and ask yourself these 6 questions. What data do I need to gather to make a decision about this, right? What assumptions am I making? Do I have any biases? Is there an alternative? Is there a cause and effect happening here that I'm not seeing or I need to be aware of? And then what's the simplest solution? And do some brainstorming around that. Okay, so some common thinking mistakes are not focusing on the right problem to begin with, right? So we often think that we're focusing on the problem, but really there's something else that's in play beneath that. So we really need to make sure we're focused on the right problem. Mistake number 2 is sticking with what and who you know. So if we're always listening to the same people or the same news or the same books or the same podcasts, right? We're comfortable with that advice they're giving us, but then that doesn't allow us to stay open to other pieces of information, right? We might be confusing cause with effect. So when we look at that, we're looking at maybe Ivy League universities, right? So schools like Harvard. And if you go there, you think your success rate is going to be higher because you went to Harvard, right? And they only pick the best of the best. But if you went to another school but you were more involved and you had a better network, you built a better network, then maybe you're going to be more successful, right? So is there a cause and effect that's at play there? And then drawing conclusions without enough data. So there's a difference between, and you need to kind of know your own personality because some people need all kinds of data, right? We call those maximizers versus satisficers in my world. So maximizers need every piece of data they can get, and they have to look at it, and they can't make a decision because they might need one more piece of data before they can pull the trigger and make a decision, right? Whereas satisficers say, when these requirements are met, that gives me enough pieces of information that I can make an informed decision, right? So you need to kind of know what your personality type is. If you're a maximizer and you need all the data you can get your hands on, but you go into analysis paralysis and you can't move forward, then, really looking at what are the most critical pieces, and then I'm going to give myself a deadline. I'm going to gather data for the next 90 days, and then in 90 days, I'm going to make a decision based on the data I have, right? So you can kind of help control that decision-making piece if you are always looking for more data and more data. Rationalizing decisions after the fact, right? We've all done that before. So really, the goal is to analyze everything that's going on, including our actions and behaviors. Talking it out with a coach or with an advisor, right, can really be a way to gain perspective and helping us to make better decisions that we don't have to rationalize after we made them, right? So thinking is much harder than you think. Love that little quote too. All right, so how do I help my clients think better? So I call this the no-brainer option to thinking about your business. I offer peer advisory boards, which are a small group of 7 women entrepreneurs who come together once a month for a 3-hour meeting, and we have this community where we can actually have these deeper level conversations. And we don't have to be perfect, and we can come and say what's really happening behind the scenes, like I'm not making enough money, or I just lost a big client, or I might have to fire a client and I'm not sure how to do that, right? So we can have those great conversations around what it's like to be running a business, right? And have those other opinions that we can get data from who have done what we're doing or have been through what we're going through. We have an agenda, we use workbooks, we have an education topic every month, and then everybody gets to bring one topic that they want to brainstorm around. So you're not only learning from the topic that you bring to discuss, you're also learning from the topics that the other women are bringing to discuss. And you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, I need to learn about that too, right? So it's amazing. And then we end the session with goal planning for the next 30 days. And then you get accountability partners matched up for the month so that you have somebody else to check in with as you move through your goals. So it's for under $200 a month. There's no long-term contracts. They're amazing. A peer advisory board is such a great gift you can give yourself as a business owner to help you with that critical thinking. I also, if you just want to do a brain dump and you're like, here's all the things I'm thinking about my business, I created this 90-minute focus session just to get those ideas out of your head and kind of into an organized action plan, right? So we do it on Zoom, it's 90 minutes. We can talk about potential topics like your time, productivity, a blend, balance, or maybe moving into a new market. If you have some marketing options or plans or pricing you want to just review, or systems, tools, and processes that you kind of just want to streamline. So that's why I created this. So there's a discount for LEAP members. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to send you that link to get the discount for only $325. And then if you want to just schedule a free call with me, you can just take a picture of the QR code or go to my website, successmagnified.com, and you can find the link there as well. Happy just to have a free 30-minute focus session to kind of review your thinking around your business, or if you find yourself being stuck in that analysis paralysis and you just need somebody to talk you through making a decision, I'm happy to do that as well. So last slide, remember, you have a brain and mind of your own. Use it and reach your own decisions. Napoleon Hill said that. So that is my presentation today. So thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully you got some value out of that and reminders. Did you guys have any questions for me?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. I took a lot of notes. I've been working so much on intuition and emotion and all this stuff that it's like, oh yeah, we can overthink, but there's a value in our thinking as well. So
yes. And I'm
a
big on
integration.
Trusting your gut and listening to that intuition. Our minds know what to tell us, right? And our bodies too. That's the trust your gut feeling, right? So we know what the right decision is, but sometimes we can get so overwhelmed with all the inputs that we don't have time to listen to that gut instinct, or what is our heart telling us to do. That's where sometimes breaking it down to the critical thinking steps can help get us out of just some of the noise, and then we have more space to listen to what is our body and our mind trying to tell us to do with that. Yeah, good point.
Love it.
Yeah. Dee Dee, any thoughts?
That was really great. I know my husband does not like whenever I critically think, but no, I'm just
Yes.
kidding.
Yes, I know.
I think critically. No, I think that's great because I think that we have lost a lot of that with all of the news that we get around on social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's important for us to just take a step back and say, is that really true? Do I feel like that's really true? And if it is true, let me go find another source that's saying the same thing, or two or three sources, right, that are different types of sources, not the same. This story on Facebook says this story on Facebook says this. That's easily
Right.
fact checked, right, within the same source, but really going out and finding different sources that are saying different things is important. So awesome, awesome. Okay, well, thank you guys, and thank you all of those Leap listeners or anybody else that's finding this on our YouTube channel, joining the Leap for Ladies community. I encourage you to join us if you're a woman entrepreneur. We get these chances to share our knowledge like I just did on our Thrive Thursday masterclasses. We have our Leap Lunch and Learns, which is our networking event once a month on the first Thursday. And then next week, we'll be going into the third week of the month where we have our Business Incubator Mastermind. So you get to work with myself and another business coach and bring whatever you want to do to talk about. So it's kind of like my peer advisory boards, but it's a drop-in almost peer advisory board, right? Where you can come and just bring any business issue you want to talk about and we'll brainstorm with you. So lots of ways we can help you as a woman entrepreneur. So check out Leap for Ladies. If you go to successmagnified.com/join Leap, you'll find all the information there. So please consider joining us. And thank you again, Whitney, for hosting and for letting me kind of co-host this one with you today. I think that Whitney will be our presenter next week. On February 27th. So again, that will be recorded and it'll go out in the newsletter and people can go back and watch these, any past mastermind trainings or Thrive Thursday masterclass trainings that we have on our YouTube channel. So with that, I will be quiet and you can take over with me if there's anything you want to add.
Thank you. Thank you so much for presenting. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that you said LinkedIn is the only social media that you spend time in lately, because I recently got kicked off of Instagram and Facebook, and I'm considering not going back and not because it
Yeah.
can be such a time suck.
Yeah.
And probably not the most effective way to get new clients.
Yeah.
So
For some people, it is, right? I know lots of people do business on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all those kind of things. For some people, that may be where your clients are, and that might be the best platform to be on. But doing some critical thinking about, is that really where I want to be? And is that where my clients are? And how do I, if my clients are there, what kind of other messages are they receiving, right? And how do I make myself stand out among those things? So, just do it. That's where the critical thinking piece comes back in. So good to know. But okay, awesome, awesome. Thank you
right.
guys so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Take care. See you next week.
Okay.
Bye.